Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is on the NASA SBIR STTR proposal tips. Today's January 22nd, 2019, and today's webinar is going to be about an hour long. I'm Robert Brook. I'm the Director of Federal Funding Programs here at the Center for Innovative Technology. CIT's is a nonprofit founded in the state of Virginia here in 1985. Our mission is creating technology-based economic development strategies to accelerate innovation, imagination, and the next generation of technology and technology companies. We plug the gaps at the earliest stages of the innovation continuum, helping entrepreneurs launch and grow high-growth technology companies and high-paying jobs for the future. Three main core funding programs here at CIT. Our GAP Seed Fund, which is an investment seed fund, making equity investments of up to 50 to 100K in early stage, high growth potential companies with high economic return. If you have interest in learning more about our investment seed fund, we actually have a family of funds. Let us know, and you can find more information about this at CIT.org, or you can send me an email, and I'm happy to make a connection. Our Commonwealth Research Commercialization Fund, or CRCF, is a grant-based fund, so there's no equity investment there, but it's a grant program. It includes 5 programs, several for the private sector, small businesses, as well as several for the academic and public institutions. 50 to 100K grants, including a 50K SBIR and STTR matching grant program. There are eligibility requirements, and the program typically is announced in the fall, letter of intent deadline sometime in December, with deadlines of the solicitation sometime in January, and then the awards are typically announced in June of each year. The current solicitation is sort of closed unless you had put in for a letter of intent. So, and finally, the Federal Funding Assistance Program that I manage focuses for the most part on the SBIR and STTR program. It includes events like today's webinar. We recently held a DoD webinar, a Department of Energy webinar. We have a series of DoD webinars online. We have over 40 webinars pre-recorded. We have other live workshops across the Commonwealth of Virginia each year. So we do work exclusively with Virginia-based companies and researchers at universities, helping them look into these funding programs. For those that are outside of the Commonwealth, you're welcome to participate in some of these training classes like you are today if you're here. We have a close relationship here on the federal funding side with our investment team. So we like to match you up with the SBIR companies up with our investment directors to make sure that we're all aware of the right funding paths and strategies and long-term planning for you. We have a small fund available called the Phase 0 and 00 Awards to help qualified companies, first-time applicants in Phase 1 or Phase 2, to engage with and hire an outside SBIR consultant, like, for example, today's instructor, who I'll talk about here in a second. So there is an advance notification required on that. You can't just come 2 weeks before a deadline and ask for that. Typically, want to do a couple months in advance if possible. We can start that or more for some agencies. So let us know. And my contact information is here. We do have, as I mentioned, a series of webinars and live events throughout the year. You can look at our events website at CIT.org/events to find out more. And this is some of our pre-recorded webinar sessions that you might want to look at. There is the URL at the bottom. There is a long URL, but take a look at that. And we will make these slides available to everybody who's registered. We'll send these out to you in PDF format, and we will post a recording of today's webinar on our website that I will send you that as well. This is my contact information. Again, if you can find information at CIT.org, and all of our team is available to contact at that website. As I load up our slides now from TechOp Consulting. Quick introduction to the team that's going to be presenting today. Bob Fielder is the president and founder of TechOp Consulting. Started in 2009, the company is focused on proposal development and technology transition support for small business. They now serve over 200 clients in 37 states. Prior to founding the company, Bob spent 9 years at Luna Innovations, where he led a team of 25 researchers who awarded dozens of SBIRs, and Luna itself has been one of the more prolific SBIR companies in the Commonwealth of Virginia, receiving hundreds of SBIRs over the last couple decades. And prior to that, he spent 9 years in the Navy as a nuke on submarines, and he has a master's degree in material science and engineering from Virginia Tech. Randy Simpson joined TechOp in 2014 and is the COO. He has a tremendous depth of industry experience that provides him with, I think, very important insights into the proposal development process from many different roles and angles that he's participated in. Roles have included as a test engineer at Lockheed, engineering estimator at Boeing, program director at Fairchild, proposal trainer and consultant over at Shipley Associates, and the program director at Honeywell, and a few other roles as well. So we're pleased to have both Bob and Randy on the call today as instructors. We try to work with those few SBIR consulting companies out there that actively engage almost exclusively in the SBIR programs, are well aware and keep abreast of the programs as they evolve constantly, and are up to date on any current trends, any issues, and they actively typically attend the national conferences, so they're engaging with the agencies themselves. So with that, Randy, I'll go ahead and, excuse me, Randy, not Randy, Bob, I'll give the control over to you here shortly, and you can take it away in a second here. Bob?
All right, thanks a lot, Robert, and thank you everyone for coming out this afternoon. Certainly appreciate it. As Robert mentioned, we've given previously DOE and DOD webinars, and so some of this initial content will be the same, but for today's webinar, we've focused the proposal writing and transition partner recruiting on NASA phase ones.
And Bob, if I want to interrupt really quick, I forgot to mention, if anybody has a question during this presentation, please go ahead and use the questions box, the questions tool on your, should be on your screen there, and you can submit a question, and we will then, at the appropriate time, we'll interrupt and state that question. If for some reason we don't get to your question because of the time constraints, we will be able to follow up with you on that. I have a list, I'll have a consolidation of those questions we can follow up with you on. So with that, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
All right, thanks, Robert. So today we're going to cover a brief introduction to the SBIR program for anyone who may not be super familiar with that. We're going to cover some bid or no bid criteria that we utilize to help clients determine whether they should or should not bid on a particular topic. Then we're going to talk about recruiting transition partners, and this is very important because having a transition partner on your team is key to having a compelling commercialization strategy. Then Randy's going to talk about understanding the proposal evaluation criteria, and is going to be emphasizing the fact that proposals are not read, they are evaluated, and that's an important distinction. Then we're going to talk about some specific proposal writing strategies and time-saving techniques. And one of the key differentiators for a talk from us is that we bring some specific actionable items to this webinar, and so you'll walk out of this webinar with some specific tools that you're going to use in the phase one proposals that you're writing right now. And then Randy's going to talk about writing a compelling commercialization strategy. And one of the key features of a compelling commercialization strategy is not just identifying a big target or a big market out there and stating that you've got a good technology for that market, but it's developing an actual plan to get into that market. All right, so with that, I'll give a little bit of an introduction to TechOp Consulting. As Robert mentioned, we've been around since 2009. We're all engineers and proposal writers. We've been in your shoes. We've written SBIRs to keep the lights on and to help develop new technologies. And so we've really scoped all of our work and services towards that small business customer. And certainly we have been in your shoes. Then we get involved with our clients at every stage, from the idea vetting, going after or looking at specific topics and determining which topics we should be going after. We help with, of course, proposal writing and securing R&D funding. and primarily through SBIRs and VAAs and other federal funding mechanisms. And then we also do a lot of work with commercialization and technology transition. And what that means is that we work with small businesses during their phase 1 or phase 2 SBIRs and help with transitioning those technologies into actual applications and programs. There's a delay here. Trying to get to the next slide. There we are. As Robert mentioned, we've got over 200 clients now in 37 states. And our clients are in every technology field you can imagine, with the exception of medical. We don't do a lot of medical, but I would do a lot of work in remote sensing, basic materials development, cybersecurity, modeling, simulation. It's really all over the place. And then again, basically what we provide two basic services. I talked about the technology transition and the proposal support. With phase 1s, for the companies where we help support the phase 1 proposal writing, we're maintaining a win rate of over 55%, whereas national average is around 15%. And for our phase 2 proposals, we're batting well over 90%, whereas the national average is around 50%. So we really put a lot of effort into all of our proposal writing to make sure that when we're done with the proposal, it's a professional looking document that's very compelling. All right. So SBIR, STTR program basics, and I'll use these terms interchangeably unless there's a specific difference. Essentially, 3.5% of the extramural R&D budget is used to fund the SBIR program. And so that means that in 2019, there's a little over $3 billion in funding available, and that's between phase 1, phase 2, and phase 2 enhancement funding. One of the key differentiators about the SBIR program is that it is the funding is non-dilutive. So you're not giving away any IP, you're not giving away any ownership in your company as you would with private investment. It's highly competitive. If you can imagine, a phase 1 win rate of around 10 to 15%, that means you got to write a lot of proposals before you win one, and so it is very highly competitive. And projects are funded in phases, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. Okay, so the objectives of the SBIR STTR program, and this is probably your first step in developing a compelling proposal, because you want to understand what does the overall SBIR program want to achieve, and how does your proposal fit into that. Well, first of all, the one goal is to meet the R&D needs of the sponsoring program. And so if you're writing a proposal to a particular NASA mission, for example, you want to understand what are the goals of that NASA mission and scope your SBIR program accordingly. Commercialization of new technology, and I'll also mention transition of that technology back to the sponsoring program. So in most cases, like for example with NASA and the DoD, for example, your primary customer is going to be the sponsoring program, but they still want you to commercialize the technology outside of the federal sphere, and of course you're going to want to do that as well, because it's a much bigger market outside of the federal government. They want to generate new technologies and new ideas, and particularly with the STTR program, they want to transition some early stage R&D out of the universities and other research facilities and into commercial products. It encourages underrepresented groups, minority-owned, women-owned, hub-zone companies are all highly encouraged to participate in the SBIR program. And then again, encourages technology transfer, and this comment is specifically geared towards technology transfer from universities out into industry via the STTR program. There you go. All right, so some of the advantages of the SBIR program, first of all, as I mentioned before, it does not require an equity stake, so you're not giving away anything. You own the intellectual property that comes out of this. The government does have a royalty-free licensing option for your technology, but they can't go and utilize it or give it to anyone else. The IP is yours. if you win a phase 1 or phase 2 SBIR, you can go after non-competed funding outside of the SBIR program, which can be allocated through that SBIR contract vehicle on a non-competitive basis. So that's another advantage. And then there's a defined process and defined R&D goals. So when you go after a particular solicitation topic, you know what they're going after and whether or not you can meet those needs. Yeah, I mentioned it's a three-phase program. Phase 1 is typically a proof of feasibility. It runs anywhere from 6 to 12 months, depending on the agency. They are funded anywhere from $150,000 to $220,000. And really, the output of this is, you just want to prove your idea. Typically, you would want to come out with a working prototype if you want to be more competitive. But it's a proof of feasibility. Phase 2 is more, you want to get, a working prototype. You want to be looking at, how are you going to produce these, the technology that you're developing. They run anywhere from 24 to 36 months. For NASA's, they're 24, and are funded anywhere from $750,000 to $1 million over that time period. And then phase 3 is actually, it's non-SBIR funds, but it can be federal funding that is developing your technology or acquiring your technology. So anything outside of SBIR is considered phase 3, including matching funds for phase 2 enhancements following phase 2. Okay, so who's qualified to go after SBIRs? First of all, it has to be a for-profit company. You need to be under 500 employees, which you can do a lot with 500 employees. It needs to be U.S. owned and operated, and the work needs to be performed in the U.S. The principal investigator, who would be the technical lead on the project, needs to be full-time employee by the company. Needs to be technically qualified to run the project, and NASA will look at the technical qualifications of your PI. So you want to make sure you have a technically relevant PI for the project, and then not as much a consideration for NASA, but you want to watch out for ITAR restrictions, particularly if you're going after a DoD SBIR. Okay, so now we want to talk about some bid, no bid criteria. And what do we look at this? First of all, the decision to bid is, it can be it is a very important decision, because you're deciding whether or not to invest probably a good 50, 60 hours minimum in a phase 1 proposal, knowing that only about 15% of those are gonna win. So when you think, wow, I'm going to spend 50 or 60 hours, times 10 proposals before I get a win, that's a lot of time invested. So you want to down select early if at all possible, and that will reduce your overall writing time. Here internally, we use 4 critical bid no bid criteria to determine whether or not we want to go after a topic or not. And we'll talk about these here in some detail right now. So first thing we look at is there an entrenched competitor? The second is, have you talked to the TPOC? And NASA is a special case, and we'll cover that here in a second. Can you meet or exceed all of the requirements in the solicitation topic? And we do mean all of the requirements. And then, do you have a transition partner and/or plan? We'll go to the next one. Okay, so spotting an entrenched competitor. Now, in DoD, they will actually take solicitation ideas from outside of DoD, and you can have companies that actually influence the writing of specific topics. NASA is not quite so much like that, although that does happen in NASA. But here's some things that you can look at to spot some entrenched competition. First of all, is documented history between a particular small business and the sponsoring program. So even within NASA, you can go back and look at the prior awardees for given topic areas, and when you start to see the same company winning over and over again on a particular topic area, two things. One, they're likely performing very well on those topics, of course, and two, they've got a deep understanding of that application space, and they're going to be able to write a compelling proposal. And so if you're going to compete against that, you'll need to really do your homework understand how are they approaching a particular problem, and how is your solution unique and better than their approach. Second, and again, the references is not actually applicable to NASA, but it is applicable to DoD and Department of Energy as well, where each topic will have background references associated with it. And you can look at those references and see, are those authored by another small business? And if so, that likely indicates that that business has a has a head start on that topic. For the third is the topic very specific, and importantly, most importantly, does it emphasize a particular approach to solving a problem? Now, now they typically will describe what they're trying to solve, of course, and the performance metrics of what they're trying to achieve. But if it gets into the detail of a specific methodology, then that could indicate one of two things. One is they've already identified a particular company that has a particular method, and they really want that method. Or two, it could just mean they've tried everything else, and this is the most promising method. But that's a concern, because if you don't have that method, if you're not a technical leader in that particular method, then you're going to be at a disadvantage for that topic. Okay, so we want to make sure that we meet all of the technical requirements in the solicitation. So you want to look at the program goals. You want to look at the sponsoring mission of the topic. You want to look at the lead centers. Like, for example, the lead centers are listed. And so you want to figure out, where does this topic really fit into that lead center, and where does this topic fit into that program. You want to look at the current state of the art that's listed in the solicitation topic, where they describe, here's what the current solution is, and you want to be able to meet that current solution. And then NASA doesn't always list very specific metrics, but where they do, you want to make sure that you can meet every single one of those technical specs. And if you cannot meet one of those technical specs, then that's a no bid right there, because you're not addressing the topic. Sometimes they will specify methods that are specifically not of interest. And if you are proposing a method or a solution that they have stated is not of interest, then your proposal is going to be dead on arrival. So keep your eyes open for those kinds of comments in the solicitation topic. Okay, so bid, no bid criteria. First of all, does the topic appear to be wired? In other words, is there an entrenched competitor there? If not, then great, move on to the next step. If it is, then that's okay. You can still write against that topic, and you can still win that topic. But just understand that you're going to have to invest and really bring your A game in order to win it. Now, this next bullet here doesn't really apply to NASA because you're not permitted to talk to the technical points of contact prior or once the solicitation is out. However, one thing you can do is, well, first of all, is understand that many of the topics in NASA will repeat from year to year. And so you can look at last year's solicitation and get a pretty good understanding of what is likely to come out in next year's solicitation. Then you can go and do a little bit of homework and find the subtopic manager, for example, talk to them before or between solicitation cycles, which is completely permissible, and then get their insights on what are they really trying to solve, with that prior topic, and what are some of their technical challenges. And that'll give you some more in-depth understanding of what they're trying to achieve, and then you can roll that information into your phase 1 proposal. But that definitely takes some homework, definitely takes digging into the program and reaching out and talking to people. And then third is, can you meet all of the technical requirements? And that doesn't mean, we do mean all of the technical requirements. If you're not going to be able to meet a power requirement or a weight requirement or a performance spec requirement, then we highly recommend not even bothering writing that proposal. Third is, you have a clear path to transition to a program of record or a NASA mission. If you don't have a way and a plan to get your technology, inserted into the NASA program that sponsors the topic, then that proposal is going to be dead on arrival. And we would say don't bother submitting that. And then also for not for NASA Phase 1s per se, but for NASA Phase 2s, we put together a strategy guide for helping to write the proposal. It includes an outline, and more importantly, it includes specific writing topics or writing suggestions in each section and subsection of the proposal. And those we put together for Phase 2s. And Randy is also going to cover some more Phase 2 techniques in his talk. So now we're going to talk about recruiting a transition partner. And this relates to getting your technology back into the NASA program of record. And so and almost all small businesses are developing a component level technology or maybe a subsystem level technology. And in order for that to get into a NASA program, you're going to need to work through one of the NASA primes to integrate your solution into their higher level system, and then they sell it to NASA. So first, I want to know, do you want a transition partner? And the answer to that question is almost always going to be yes. You want to determine who is the best transition partner. Oftentimes, it'll be the top level prime, like a Lockheed or a Boeing. But depending on your technology and where your technology fits into the supply chain, you might be targeting a tier 2 subcontractor to one of those larger primes. And we're going to talk about reaching out to contacts in these areas with the assumption that you don't already have contacts there. And so in other words, you're going to be reaching out to a cold contact and try to recruit them to your team. And you want to explain to them or convince them why do they want to team with you on your Phase 1 or on your Phase 2 proposal. For NASA, you want to focus on the mission or program. And so again, do your homework, understand who are the primes related to that mission or program. And I mentioned tier 2 primes. Sometimes some of the larger primes will be less inclined to adopt new technology because they've already essentially got a lock on the market. Although Lockheed's very good about teaming, so is Boeing and some of the others, but some of them are not. And in those cases, you might want to target a mid-sized organization that is more inclined to import new technology in order to be more competitive. And then you want to vet the organization and ensure that they are going to be able to provide for your program what you need. And we'll talk about that in more specifics in a minute. I should point out, and you guys, of course, will receive these slides, but we linked an article on recruiting a transition partner that you can go and read and cover in some more detail. So finding the right organization. Once you found the right organization, you want to find specific contacts. And again, this next few slides is geared towards creating new contacts where you don't have any existing inroads. So with some of the large organizations, you want to zero in on some of the specific divisions and then focus on key decision makers within those divisions. And you're not necessarily looking for like a VP at Lockheed, but maybe a senior engineer or an engineering manager or someone of that nature, program director, someone of that nature within a prime like Boeing or Lockheed as a key decision maker. You want to find relevant contacts. So when you reach out to this cold contact that's never heard of you before, you want to have something that will convince them that, oh, hey, this is not spam. This is something that's right up my alley. And so you want to do your homework and find some relevant contacts. And we utilize LinkedIn quite a bit. That's a pretty good tool because people will publish the different programs that they've worked on. In fact, if you have a particular NASA mission that you're bidding towards, if you get on LinkedIn and search that program name, you're likely to find people that are working in that area. And then here's some other useful links for finding email information and things like that. I don't want to dwell on those too long. Yeah, and again, it's easier if you have an established network, but this process works for creating new contacts. And we use this all the time to make inroads into areas where we have no prior experience. So once you found the specific contact, you want to have a hook to get them on the phone. And so we like to put together what we call a tech profile, which is essentially a one-page summary of your technology and your proposal. Obviously not proprietary, not ITAR restricted, and that sort of thing. But you want to give just enough of a description to get this contact interested and get them to call you back. And understanding how they work. Most of the primes that we've worked with prefer to work as a subcontractor on a phase 1 or a phase 2 project. And we found that's the most effective because now that person is actually integrated in your project and is providing some meaningful support. And we've run into a lot of companies where they just want to get a letter of support or a letter of interest from a prime like a Raytheon or Boeing or someone, but a letter of interest is really not helpful. But a letter, like a true letter of commitment, is, and having them on board as a team member is helpful. Although in phase 1s, they recommend not including a lot of letters because it chews up your page count. And so you don't want to include the actual letter in your proposal, but maybe some quotes from it or something along those lines. But getting them on board as a subcontractor on your team is key. Okay, I mentioned having a role in mind for them. So when you reach out, you want to have an idea of what are they going to provide. And in phase 1, they typically can provide some subject matter expertise and insertion strategy. So how are you going to get your technology into a particular program? In the category of subject matter expertise, particularly with NASA, your technology is going to be operating probably in a pretty harsh environment of space or in an aircraft environment, something like that. And so you want to have a better understanding of what that environment entails. And then insertion strategy, as a technology developer, you may not know how your technology is really going to fit into that NASA program, but the prime on that program will know how to ingest new technology. In phase 2s, they tend to act more as more of an integrated transition partner, and they often will provide validation testing, system integration requirements, maybe some system integration engineering support, that sort of thing. And then in phase 3, they can provide typically support with respect to production, integration, and then ultimately sales back to the NASA mission. And typically, we found that around 10% of the budget is appropriate for phase 1 or phase 2 for getting a prime engaged in your process or in your project. Okay, now you want to think about your email. Again, reaching out to a cold contact. Everyone gets 50 emails a day, and so you want your email to stand out. So we like to open our email with a subject line that includes teaming opportunity as the opening line. And why do we do that? Because you want your recipient to open the email, of course, and if they see teaming opportunity, then that implies to them that there's some funding behind this, and you're not just asking for a free handout. Then in the email, you want them to understand why are you contacting them. So in your email, you want to open up in the first line or so with something about them and about their role and why they would be interested in working on your project or on your project. And then you want to say just one or maybe 2 sentences at most about your technology. Definitely don't go into a lot of detail because that'll make for a big long email and no one's going to read it. But you want to convey enough information for them to say, yes, I need that. I can use that to solve a problem that I lost sleep about last night. Then you want to, in the middle part of the email there, you want to indicate what you want from them in the phase 1 or in the phase 2 when you get to that stage, and you want that to be something obviously that they can provide. And then we want to wrap up with confirming that hey, this is a teaming opportunity. We want you to be involved in our project, and that just confirms that there's funding behind the email. So and again, the goal of this email is to get them on the phone and get them talking about your project. So once you get them on the phone, here are some things that we like to cover. First of all is market pull. What's the real driver for this technology? What are the challenges for getting this technology into that application? What are some of the requirements? Like what are the technical requirements? Are there price point targets? Are there environmental challenges to this application? We want to get all that information from the prime. Also, finding out what is the real state of the art. So, the prime you're talking to has likely been trying to solve this problem, the same problem for quite a while. And so they've gone out, they've surveyed the industry, they've surveyed all the potential solutions, and so they're going to be well versed in the current state of the art. And so you're going to want to get that from them and roll that into your phase 2 plan. Having the understanding that you know what the state of the art is. And then you want them to confirm some novel aspect of your technology. And this is going to roll into your letter of support and a call-out box, or a call-out quote that I'll talk about in a second. But obviously you don't want to share how your technology works per se, but just some operational capability that your technology can enable. You want them to confirm that that's a novel capability. And then all of this information gets rolled into your letter of support, but more importantly, it gets rolled into your proposal, because now you've got some primary research on your application, and you are specifically targeting some of the challenges that you've identified with this discussion with the prime. Okay, and then creating a letter of support. This is this is kind of your ultimate goal of recruiting the transition partner, is getting them to generate, or getting them to provide a letter of support. But we don't want them to write it. We want you to write it because you can include some specific items that you want to be able to highlight in your proposal. So in expressing the need, this is the one area where we want them to utilize some of their own words in expressing the need for your technology in their application. And the reason we like them to utilize their words is because they'll use some industry language or some application-specific language that you may not use frequently, and so they'll be able to describe the benefit of your technology a little bit better with that specific application. Then we want to have a quote that we can pop in a call-out box. So, and again, you may not want to include the entire letter in your proposal, but it's perfectly fine to pull out a quote, pop it in a call-out box, kind of like this little blue box you see here in the lower left-hand part of the slide, and then highlight that quote up front on the first page or two of your proposal, letting the reviewer know that yes, we're teamed with the prime, and here's how they're helping us on the phase 1, and here's why teaming with them is going to enable us to transition into your program. And the active participation, I mentioned before that a simple letter of interest or a simple letter of support is really not sufficient to gain any points. You want them to be actively involved in your phase 1 or in your phase 2 proposal. So this is the final slide on the transition partners recruiting, and now we're going to turn it over to Randy to talk about the proposal evaluation criteria and get into some details about writing the phase 1 proposal. So Randy, take it away.
All right, thank you. Let's just start out with a basic proposal. One of the things that I like to do is go back and say, all right, what is a proposal? And just think about that from a perspective. A lot of people think, well, this is my opportunity to show off my technology, or to show off my company, or to show off my smarts, or here's an opportunity to educate my customer on how good we are and what this technology is all about. And yet I'm convinced, as you've already seen, because I snuck it on there, it's a sales document. And so you're selling the technology in some cases, because in SBIR proposals, there are a number of technologies that are put out there for bids. And you may be competing not only with another company against the technology that you're bidding on, but the technology might be in competition with other technologies. So it's important to sell the importance of this technology, and then the importance of your ability to be able to execute on this technology and achieve the proof of concept and the prototype, and to be able to insert it into a commercial market. That's important to do. So, as I said, the proposal is a sales document. It's not a research paper, or it's not a fun read, it's not a textbook. And as Bob said earlier, we're convinced that they're not read. No one's going to take these things home and sit on the back deck and have a cup of tea and look out over the backyard and read this thing in a pleasurable format. They're going to sit down in their office, evaluate it, and get them done quickly and get back to their regular job. So there are specific instructions, there are criteria. It is independent. There's an independent assessment, a fair and non-biased assessment. The evaluator cannot bring anything to the table that is not in the proposal. So they're not read. Once again, they're evaluated. If you could just stick with that, that'll help a lot. And the profile of the evaluator, there are no professional evaluators in the federal government. I went and did a search on USA Jobs, and there's no such thing as evaluator in the federal government. So they were basically in the wrong place at the wrong time. We got yanked onto this team. They go through this process, which is often ad hoc, driven by the review board chairperson. And I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that's the way it ends up working. And it is hard to evaluate proposals. Imagine yourself in that seat, and someone brings 6 or 8 different proposals against this topic to you, says, here, we want you to evaluate these things and rank them and tell us which ones are good and so forth. That's really challenging. It's especially difficult when you open the first page of the first proposal and it's just dense 10-point font text. That's really hard. So, and also when the terminology is not well defined. You know, the solicitation may well, and in fact is required to, tell you what the criteria for evaluation are, but the definition of those criteria sometimes is not well defined, and you need to help make it easy on the evaluator. So read these criteria. They have different kinds of criteria associated with different solicitations. The scientific, technical merit, experience, quals, facilities, effectiveness of the work plan. The commercialization is actually scored with adjectives as to whether it's sort of like the old Sears, good, better, best, not quite like that, but almost. And then price reasonableness, they basically say if the price isn't reasonable, they're not going to evaluate it at all. So these are the evaluation criteria. You need to express and address this terminology in the proposal to show, all right, this has merit because, this is feasible because. Use the terminology and explain to them what that means and address them as you write. Address them early in proposal and then prove your assertions as you move on into the proposal. That's really important. Now, as you know, the fiscal 19 general solicitation from NASA is on hold right now. So everything that I've put in here is from the solicitation from the prior year. It's unlikely anything will change, but nevertheless, I just want you to be aware of that. The specific instructions for phase 1 are in section 3.3, and the topics are out in section 9. Now, in this talk, we're going to focus on the technical proposal. The instructions are there in 3.3.4, and for phase 1, there is a 19-page limitation for the technical proposal. Now, as Bob had stated before, it is important to study this solicitation very carefully. This is from last year's solicitation. It's one of the topic areas, and you know it shows you right there who the lead mission directorate is, the Science and Technology Mission Directorate. It shows you who the participating mission directorates are. So you need to understand, do a little background check and understand what these people do, what drives them, what are their interest levels. And in NASA, you're going to find some of the mission directorates are overlapping, so you need to be a little bit cautious about that. But make sure you understand that, understand their mission. And you know, in this solicitation, they talked about a key goal is to. Well, you should pay attention to that. Be careful that you're responding to those words like key goal. In the subtopic, they talk about the lead center, as Bob mentioned before. There's Ames and JPL and Johnson. And then they have specific technical areas. So you need to show that you have understanding of photovoltaic energy conversion. And you need to show that understanding. You need to show it in the way that you write. You need to show it in your PI's background and education and experience. It'd be wonderful to show that also in your commercialization experience, that you understand the photovoltaic energy conversion world. That's important. There are specific technologies that they've stated here that they're interested in. And you'll notice that they get very precise in this description. So I know Bob had said before, well, you know, be careful when you get too precise because it could be wired. There are a lot of really pretty specific things in here. And so there's a couple things you need to take away from that. If you don't really understand this language, if cold in heat exchangers is not something you understand, then it might be you want to stay away from this topic. If they're showing specific solutions rather than just asking for research, you just need to be careful about that. Read these things very carefully, make sure you understand those. And as Bob said, one of the best things to do is during the off cycle Just go here. Here's this solicitation right here that's on the street right now from 2018. It was put out a year ago in January. This is probably a bad time to actually be doing this, but back in April or May or June or July, go make an appointment with someone who's in one of these mission directorates, who's in this technology field, and you can find them, and go talk to them and get some of your knowledge input there and some of the questions that you have and some of the technology that you bring, so that you could potentially see a topic that comes out in the next cycle that's got your name on it. That would be really good. Okay, the criteria are listed, and here they are. Scientific, technical merit, feasibility is half of the points. The experience, quals, and facility are 25%, and the work plan is 25%. As I said, the commercial potential is scored from an adjective standpoint, and the price reasonable it says it is evaluated, and that if it's not reasonable, they're just going to throw it away. So one thing you need to be cautious of, or I think is a wise plan for your proposal, and I'm a strong believer in planning your proposal before you start writing it, is to figure out what your page allocation is going to be. So the technical volume, I use basic math for the criteria, the three that are scored here, to say, well, okay, if they're giving me 19 pages and my allocation is 50, 25, 25, then I need to figure out how that math works out in order to put a page count on each individual section. So I did some math here on the next page. Now, you can argue with the math. I just think it's a good idea to do it. So I list each of the criteria here, and I say, all right, of the page count, what's the allocation? Well, they said this was 50%, so I'm going to give it a little bit more than half the pages. These were 25%, but commercialization still needs to be covered. So for each criteria, I'm going to say this is basically how I'm going to get 19 pages